One of the more interesting teams heading into 2024 is the USF Bulls. Alex Golesh did a great job in his first year as a head coach, and he is doing a lot of great things for this program. This is something that I think a lot of people expected the previous regime to do. Obviously, that did not work out. Now, there are still things they must work on, and we'll talk about that today as we deep dive into USF Bulls. Before we do that, though, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like, share the video as well. It goes a long way in helping this series continue, helping this series thrive. It also helps the channel tremendously. We are well on our way to 5,000 subscribers, and that's not possible without you. So make sure you're doing all of that, and let's dive into the USF Bulls. We'll start with Golesh and what he did, because a lot of people weren't certain about what he could do. Now, I think Bulls fans were excited about a new coach coming in. Golesh came in from Tennessee, where he ran the system that he runs, which a lot of people attribute to Josh Heupel. But we saw last year that he knows what he is doing. He knows how to call plays. He knows how to at least get a program to play at a certain level. Offense averaged nearly 32 points per game. And really, the offense didn't have a ton of concerns. When you look at what they did last year, they took huge strides, and some of the players we'll talk about today were a big reason why. And I expect them to take another step in 2024. That's how good this group was. That's how much they can improve. And if the defense even takes the slightest step, then I think that this is going to be a team that's competing for a conference championship and could potentially push for a playoff run. Now, the transfer portal is really where this staff has done a great job of addressing certain needs. Now, this year was a little bit different than last year. They brought in, I think, more quality over quantity, but there's still plenty of names that are coming in, plenty of names that are departing. So there's some big names that are leaving, but I think that if you ask this Bulls staff and the fan base, they would tell you that they're getting better with even with some of the losses that they have. There's a few guys that really stand out. Teron Keith is someone who can add good depth to the running back position. It's a good group already, but you add him to the mix, he'll be someone that can contribute right away. Maybe not be the starter, but definitely someone who can fill in and make that group even deeper. Joshua Cobbs is kind of a relatively unknown. The Houston transfer didn't have the best year in 2023, but he is coming in to hopefully play a little bit bigger role. Though, again, this offense, like I said, is very good. So getting reps, getting time on the field is going to be difficult no matter who you are. Now, the people that they lost, you look at some of these players, and obviously losing a guy like Trammell Logan is not ideal, but also, again, I think if you ask most people surrounding this program, they would say that that's okay. There's certain losses that they're okay with, even if you're a multi-year player that you have plenty of experience. Coffrey Brown, the experiment there never really worked. He's off to the transfer portal as well. Michael Dukes at running back. Again, some of that is just you have so much talent at certain positions, so you have to let guys go. Will Jones, the second leaving, is obviously another name to know. And then Gary Bohannon, it's not really a surprise, especially with what we saw from Byron Brown. Now, when you talk about Byron Brown, someone who took huge strides in 2024. The offense thrived because of his success, and he is a huge reason why this team was so good. Over 3,200 yards passing, 26 touchdowns. You obviously would like to see him reduce those 11 interceptions. Also rushed for 809 yards and 11 more scores. A dual threat who can do it all, someone who is going to be a key player for this offense as expected, and someone to definitely keep an eye on if you're not a USF fan. But even USF fans will have their eyeballs glued to what Byron Brown can do for them. He is someone who is capable of making explosive plays with both his arm and his legs, and now he has a full year of experience under his belt to improve upon, to take and develop even more. The guys behind him, now it's going to be a step back, but Bryce Archie and Israel Carter, keeping Israel Carter is something I think this staff is very proud of, getting him come back to USF after contemplating hitting the transfer portal and going to another school. So that was a big, I should say, a preventative subtraction there. So that's solid depth. Again, I think that you're going to lose a little bit if Brown goes out, but you at least have guys who've seen the field who are still provide some excitement, if you will. Now, the running back position we talked about earlier, this is a group that I think has good depth. Naquan Wright, to me, is still one of the more underrated running backs in college football. He was the same way when he was at Florida. He's the same now at USF. A solid player, 797 yards, 8 touchdowns. Like to see him get a little bit more involved in the passing attack, but for now, you don't really necessarily need him to do that. I think he'll take a little bit more of a bigger role in 2024 in that passing attack. Kelly Joyner comes back for another year, 156 yards in on the ground, and also 156 yards as a receiver. So he is someone who can be a contributor in both facets of the game. This is kind of what I want to see from Wright a little bit more. But again, if you're sticking to the run, that's just fine too. Then you put in guys like Kwan Powell, who's back. He's going to be a solid contributor. And we talked about Taron Keith, someone who can add good depth. Again, this is a group that Wright is definitely the guy, but Joyner, Powell, and Keith give them good depth in case Wright goes down with an injury, needs a break, especially with the blistering pace that this offense likes to play. There's going to be times where they're gas. There's going to be times where they need a breather. And having depth like this is huge. Having guys that can step up and play bigger roles is something that you need, especially in this offense. And this is a good place to be in. Alex Golesh and offensive coordinator Joel Gordon are in a great position because you have the depth to be able to rotate guys in and test opposing defenses. This is a team that is expecting to compete for an AAC title this year. And with this offense, it's easy to see why. Brown is obviously going to be the big focal point, but I think Naquan Wright gets a little bit more love this year. And we get to see a little bit more of what he can do now that the system is more in place. Everyone's a little bit more comfortable than what they were last year. So this is definitely a group that can take strides towards that next level, take strides towards being better and making teams be a little bit more scared than they were in 2023. Now, the passing attack is going to be a big part of that as well. And when you talk about options, Byron Brown has options. We'll talk about Sean Atkins because within the AAC circles, pretty much everybody knows who he is, but college football in general still doesn't really know who Sean Atkins is. Over 1,000 yards last year, 7 touchdowns. You're looking at someone who is a reliable pass catcher, can get open, knows how to run routes very well, great cuts, very sharp cuts to get open. He is someone who creates separation on a regular basis. And when they need to pick up good yardage, Sean Atkins has been that guy. He's also taken a little bit of a step forward in terms of explosiveness, been that big play kind of guy for them. They have a couple other guys that will fill that role. So Atkins is more that underneath intermediate short guy, but you're looking at someone who is a big time weapon for the USF Bulls. Now, Naeem Simmons is someone who will take over more of that big playmaker role. Averaged 16.3 yards per catch on just 39 catches, had 5 touchdowns. He's a big time playmaker who then now has a full year of experience under his belt in this system with his new teammates. And he is someone who I think takes a huge step forward with teams focusing on Sean Atkins. Another guy that comes in from Purdue, Abdur Rahman Yassin, so a player who they think can be a deep threat at 6'2", 200 pounds, has that bigger frame than Simmons and Atkins. So he is someone who can play on the outside and be a little bit more of a physical presence. Again, that's going to be huge, especially with the playmakers they have out wide. Everyone, like I said, knows what Atkins is capable of doing. Everyone knows what Naeem Simmons can do, at least within the AAC circles. So if you can find ways to get these other guys involved, then you're going to open things up for everyone else. The tight end position is a little bit more unknown. Weston Wolf comes in and should be one of the main players in that rotation, although Gunnar Greenwald could be another one as well. And the staff is really high on Jonathan Eccles and what he can do. So the tight end position could be a rotation more than anything, but it's still a group that will be very explosive and very helpful for these wide receivers. The other wide receivers to keep an eye on, Michael Brown-Stephens is very underrated in this group. 350 yards and 2 touchdowns last year. The former Minnesota transfer has been solid for this team as that third or fourth guy, and he will be that role once again. It's going to be fun to watch to see what he can do. He is someone who will be able to take that step forward because this offense as a whole improves, and you'll see that his production improves as well. Joshua Cobbs is another player that this staff really liked in the transfer portal coming in from Houston. That is someone who to keep an eye on there. And Joshua Porter, a true freshman. Now, when you talk about the AAC, not a ton of true freshmen are standing out and playing bigger roles, especially offensively. But I think that this is a guy who can be that for USF. And he is someone who can be explosive, someone who the staff obviously really likes. And he's put in the work to be able to be considered in this rotation to be able to take that next step, and someone who the staff really hopes can be a factor. Because if you have more, again, with the speed and the pace at which USF plays, this is a group that needs to be deep because you need guys to step in. Now, they also do things to combat some of that fatigue. You have half of the field not really running routes, kind of walking while the other half runs it. So that's something that helps them, but you're still going to need that depth. Depth is going to be a big factor. And a guy like Porter, Cobbs, Brown, Stevens are vital to that because they can step up when some of these other guys need a breather. And if this passing attack, it can be exactly what it was last year or better, then you're looking again at an offense that takes a big step forward. Despite the success that they had last year, you're going to see a group that could be even better in 2024. The offensive line obviously plays a huge role in that. You'd like to see that rushing attacks do exactly what it did last year, and that's going to start up front. And they have a lot of returning players that are going to play big roles in that. RJ Perry and Derek Bowman are the two tackles that most people will pay attention to. Bowman's a former Houston transfer. Perry's the former defensive lineman, former Tennessee transfer. So keeping an eye on those guys who have a combined 16 starts. A little bit more greener in terms of experience in the starting roles, but two guys that I think this staff really likes. And this fan base also is ready to see thrive. The inside, I have less concerns about. Maybe at the left guard position, Andrew Trefoil is someone who is a little bit less experienced than others, but when you're talking about this group as a whole, there's plenty to be excited about. Especially you have a guys like Mike Lofton and Zane Herring coming back, experienced players who know what it takes to win and now have had that taste of success from last year. That's a group that's going to be really fun to watch because again, you go 7-6 after that last year, especially when you look at the Alabama game. Yes, they lost, but that also gave them confidence to compete against better teams. They know that they're capable of doing that, and they return a good chunk of this roster that was a big time impact group last year. You have a number of key returning starters, and the offensive line is no exception. Now, behind them, they do have guys with experience, so it's not going to be something where one of these guys go down and you're getting worried because you have plenty of experience behind them. Now, it's not as experienced as the front group, but you still have guys like Cole Skinner, who has 3 starts under his belt, 6 games. Not the most, but I believe that this group feels confident in his abilities. Cole Best is another guy, 13 games of experience, doesn't have a start, but he's played. Nikola Milikovic is someone who can also be that guy, less experience than some of these other players, but still someone who can take a step forward and be a major contributor for this offensive line. Again, this offense doesn't need to reinvent the wheel. They don't need to do anything completely different. This is a group that returns a good chunk of its players, a good chunk of its contributors, and the offense should be able to do exactly what it did last year with the same guys in place. There shouldn't be too many concerns about this offense. I'm really excited to see the explosive plays that they can create. And with Byron Brown running the show, there shouldn't be too many concerns, regardless of who's coming in, who's going out, that kind of stuff. The defense is kind of a different story. The defensive line could be a really fun group, though it's mostly unproven talents. Though I will say that there's some really exciting depth that could take steps forward. Now, this first group, Jason Vaughn is a veteran who's been around for a while, knows what it takes to compete at the AAC level, and someone who can get all these other guys up to speed. Doug Blue Eli and Rashad Cheney will be fun to watch on the interior, two guys with fairly good size that will be difficult to block. I really am excited to see what this defense can do, and a lot of that starts up front. If you're able to be more disruptive than you were last year, because again, this was a group that was solid against the run, finished 49th, but everything else was pretty bad. The passing attack, pass defense, I should say, was not very good. They need to improve, and part of that is getting to the quarterback. So guys like Vaughn and DJ Harris, I think DJ Harris is set to have a big year. Someone who, again, his numbers don't look super impressive, but he is someone who is very capable of making those kinds of plays that you need from an edge player. And I think that he has just got a taste of what it's going to be like for him in 2023, and he's ready to take things to the next level. 35 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2 fumble recoveries. I think that there's a lot of potential in this group. Depth behind them, this is where normally I'd feel a little bit concerned, but I think that this group has some good players behind them. The defensive tackle position is probably the biggest question. Emmanuel Hickman, the former ECU transfer, is probably the biggest name to know on the interior, but the edge has pretty good talent around them, lots of potential. You have Bernard Gooden coming back, Michael Williams the second, and a guy that comes in from Iowa Western in Jalen Pettis, someone who could be a big time contributor, a disruptive force for this defense. Again, if you're going to improve the passing attack, it's not just the secondary that needs to step up. You need this defensive group, this defensive line to get to the quarterback. If you're not getting to the quarterback, you're giving some of these offenses way too much time to make plays. And this is a group that is going to be very talented. They have to prove that they're more talented than the offensive lines that they face, because if they can't get to the quarterback, they're going to give up yards once again. It's going to be a rough season if you're not able to do that. If you can't be disruptive, teams have time to do exactly what they want to do, and that secondary can't do everything forever. Now, they are a group that needs to improve, just like the defensive line, but this is still a group that can be much better. And really, you don't need to improve that much. You don't really need to take a huge step. Yes, you finished 49th defending the run, but even if you bring your pass defense from 132nd to in the 60s to 80s, that's a huge step that you can take. And that improves your team dramatically. You don't need to be a top 25 defense after what we saw last year. And this group probably won't be, but Todd Orlando has some things up his sleeve. He's an experienced coordinator, and he has talent in front of him that's going to be able to make plays. You can do a little bit more things with this experienced group, and you can unleash some of these players, unlike what you were able to do last year. I think last year was more just doing what you can and getting by, but now this year they're really going to be able to thrive. And the linebackers are kind of the same way there. DJ Gordon comes back for yet another season. He's an experienced player who can be disruptive. 58 tackles, 9 tackles for loss. Jalen Schuler had a big year for USF last year, a second team All AC selection, according to College Football Network. 97 tackles, 8.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. You're looking at someone who is capable of being a big time playmaker, a very, very good player in the AAC, someone who is one of the better defenders in the group of 5. And Gordon's just as experienced. You just get another guy that joins him. The depth at this position appears to be pretty solid. Mac Harris is another guy that's going to be fun to watch. If Schuler and Gordon need a break, you can throw Mac Harris in there. Or if you're going to, 3 linebacker looks, maybe you can throw him in there as well. 33 tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, 3 fumble recoveries, 1 forced fumble. Jimmy Petway is another guy, 19 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss. Langston Long is a Virginia transfer who's looking to get a little bit more time. So you have options in this linebacker group. You have plenty of players that can make plays, and you have plenty of talent to improve. There's really no reason why this group can't get better. Todd Orlando is a defensive coach who knows what he's doing, and he's put together some impressive defenses in the past. And this could be a group that takes a huge step forward. With most of the attention is on the offense. If this defense takes even the slightest step, then this team as a whole, like I said before, will be better. That's just a fact that if you're going to find a way to improve, it's going to be on the defensive side of the ball. The offense obviously can improve as well, and I think they do, but this defense is more important. They're more of the X factor in determining how successful USF will be in 2024. That secondary we talked about a little bit earlier. This is a group that has plenty of talent. So it's, again, if you're looking at this defense, you should expect them to improve. Logan Berryhill and Taven Ward are probably the 2 biggest names that you know. They're the guys that have postseason awards after what they did last year, combined for 5 interceptions. But there's a couple other players that definitely are worthy of pushing them for those awards this year. You could have more guys that are in that conversation. Guys like Jalen Stokes, Amaris Brown combined for 4 interceptions. So those are 2 guys that are looking to improve their postseason recognition, but that also helps your team as well. You're not going to have too many struggles if your secondary can shut people down. And there's not a ton that needs to be addressed outside of like maybe depth. You're looking at a group that has some question marks behind them. The nickelback position could be interesting. I think DeMarco Augustine is a really interesting player from Youngstown State, could be a major contributor for this group. Tennessee transfer Deshaun Rucker could be a corner that steps up in a big way. Jarvis Lee is another one that could be in that rotation. They have options. It's just what is the talent level of those options? And again, if this pass defense improves even a little bit, the defense as a whole is going to take a step forward. And part of that is on the secondary, part of that is on the defensive line. If you're finding ways to get to the quarterback, if you're finding ways to knock the balls down and get ball back to your offense, and offense, like I said before, that should take a step forward. USF's in business. It's just a matter of putting certain things together. The strengths and concerns of this team are pretty obvious. We talked about that. Quarterback's a strength. Even if Byron Brown goes down, I like the options they have, even if it's a little bit of a step back. But quarterback is going to be fun. Brown is set to have a huge year. Wide receiver obviously is loaded. You could also put running back in this group, if you will. And then linebacker. I think linebacker is really good, despite being on a defense that wasn't exactly a solid group or a disruptive group at times. You're looking at a group that is going to be much better than it was last year, and you have plenty of options. The biggest concern probably is that defensive line. You don't have a ton of proven commodities right now. You have a couple guys that have shown what they're capable of doing, but what are they going to be able to do to take a step? Because again, we talked about how the the really, if you look at what this defense needs, they need to get to the quarterback. They need to find a way to be more disruptive. And it's a conference that maybe isn't as explosive as it once was, but there's still plenty of talent around this conference. There are plenty of teams that are going to be able to take advantage of looks if you're not getting to the quarterback or if you're not able to shed your blocks, you're going to have a tough time really at getting anything done, getting the ball to your offense, preventing people from scoring. And that's going to be a huge question mark for this team. Secondary depth could be viewed as a concern as well. There's plenty of options, but is there any proven options? So far, the answer is no, but that's why you play the season. That's why you take a look at what you have, what you don't. And Todd Orlando, like I said, can get the job done. And really, when you look at this team, I don't have any huge concerns outside of those two. Maybe offensive line depth could be a little bit of a question. Quarterback depth, if you look at the numbers, that not necessarily a proven group, but there's definitely potential. The staff really likes what they got in Archie and Carter. So that's something that maybe isn't a huge concern. You could probably put it here if you want, though. X factor will be that defensive line. Again, if they have a couple guys step up, that quickly becomes something in their favor, and it helps this defense tremendously. When you look at the schedule, this schedule is really fun for USF because you have a lot of winnable games outside of two. And in reality, we didn't really expect the Alabama game to be what it was last year. So maybe you're seeing some closer games than expected. But Cookman is obviously going to be a win at Alabama. It's probably going to be a loss. I know last year probably gave USF fans hope, but I don't think that that's going to be the same thing. Defending Kalen DeLore's offense, you're looking at Kalen DeBoer, you're looking at someone who knows what he's doing offensively. And this is a defense that needs a little bit of time to get up to speed and to show improvement. And doing so on the road in Tuscaloosa, probably not happening, to be honest. But we'll move on from that. That Southern Miss should be a win, especially if this team is going to take that next step. So 2-1 heading into the Miami game, a Miami team that yes, everyone likes to troll and make fun of for their struggles. Miami should be a much better team. So honestly, realistically, this should be a 2-2 team heading into the Tulane game. Now, beating Tulane, this actually is a pretty tough stretch, if you ask my opinion. At Tulane, Memphis, UAB, and at FAU. Now, UAB and FAU didn't have great seasons, didn't make bowl games last year, but I expect both of those programs to be better in 2024. That being said, if you want to get on the fast track to the AAC championship game, if you can beat Tulane and Memphis in back-to-back weeks, then, or excuse me, in back-to-back games, then you're looking at a team that is the favorite to win that conference. There won't be too many teams that can challenge them. Playing UAB should be a better team, but USF is that better team in that game. UAB will be better, but USF is the better team. Same with FAU. Yes, you have to head to the road, but it's going to be a good way to assert your dominance. And if you're at this point, if you're heading into that game 5-2, you're looking pretty good. And 6-2 heading into that final stretch, honestly, the Navy game is always going to be tough. I feel like USF struggles every single time they face Navy, no matter how good they are. And again, if this defense does not take that step forward, that Navy game is going to be a major headache. Depending on the record, too, add that into the account. At Charlotte, Tulsa, and at Rice should be 3 wins. So you have potentially 4 wins to finish the season, heading into that AAC championship game. That will make USF one of the hottest teams heading into the conference championship week. And then that's where you potentially start talking about the playoff. You are going to have to hope that other teams don't go undefeated or have one loss. But if you keep things close against Alabama and Miami and you take care of business with the rest, this is a team that you could be talking about in the college football playoff. I don't know if you necessarily see that this year, but a 10-2 ceiling makes that possible. The floor to me should be 6-6. This should be a bowl game at worst. And you're looking at a team that should take steps forward both offensively and defensively. And that means you're going to win more than 7 games. You're going to win more than 6 games in the regular season. So 8-4, 9-3, probably more of the realistic prediction. But 10-2 is definitely possible. And then it just comes down to how well did you play against potential playoff teams in Alabama and Miami? And what does everyone else do in the group of five? If teams struggle in the group of five and you find ways to beat Tulane and Memphis, 2 other playoff teams, then you're looking at a team that will be really fun to watch in the playoff, but also a much improved team that's going to take college football by storm.